There are regulations and codes that address the mounting of disconnect boxes, including the direction of the door swing. National Electrical Code Section 110.26e states that boxes shall be securely mounted in a cabinet or enclosure or on a suitable support, and shall be accessible without removing other raceways, cables, or any part of the building structure or finish. National Electrical Code Section 408.4 specifically addresses disconnect boxes and states that enclosures for overcurrent devices shall not be used as junction boxes, auxiliary gutters, or raceways. National Electrical Code Section 408.4 also states that cabinets shall be mounted in a manner that will prevent objects from falling into the cabinet. These regulations imply that the door of a disconnect box should swing outward to prevent objects or debris from falling into the cabinet and causing an electrical hazard. There is a height requirement for the bottom of a disconnect box if the door swings outward. National Electrical Code Section 408.4 states that overcurrent devices shall be accessible to the operator without climbing on or over any obstacle. This means that the bottom of the disconnect box should be mounted at a height that allows the operator to reach the disconnect without having to step on or over any obstacle, such as a plenum. The specific height requirement will vary depending on the height of the operator and the location of the obstacle. Therefore, it is generally not permitted to mount a disconnect box with the door swinging upward. Additionally, the bottom of the disconnect box should be mounted at a height that allows the operator to reach the disconnect without having to step on or over any obstacle. When installing electrical equipment, you must consider the National Electrical Code requirements for working space. This space ensures that electricians and other qualified personnel can safely install, maintain, and operate electrical equipment. The working space has requirements for height, width, and depth. Firstly, consider the height. The minimum headroom required above service equipment, switchboards, panel boards, or motor control centers is typically 6.5 feet or 2 meters. This is outlined in National Electrical Code Section 110.26A3. This height must be maintained throughout the working space. Secondly, think about the width. The width of the working space should be the width of the equipment, or 30 inches or 762 millimeters, whichever is greater. This ensures that there is enough room for personnel to move around and work on the equipment safely. Thirdly, the depth of the working space is determined by the voltage to ground of the equipment and the condition of the space opposite the equipment. Condition 1 exists where there is exposed live parts on one side and no live or grounded parts on the other side of the working space, or where exposed live parts are on one side and insulated parts are on the other side. Condition 2 exists where there are exposed live parts on one side and grounded parts on the other side of the working space. Condition 3 exists where there are exposed live parts on both sides of the working space. The depth requirements vary depending on these conditions. For example, for equipment operating at 150 volts or less to ground, the minimum depth is 3 feet or 914 millimeters for condition 1, 3 feet or 914 millimeters for condition 2, and 3 feet or 914 millimeters for condition 3. For equipment operating at between 151 volts and 600 volts, the minimum depth is 3 feet or 914 millimeters for condition 1, 3.5 feet or 1067 millimeters for condition 2, and 4 feet or 1220 millimeters for condition 3. For equipment operating at between 601 volts and 2500 volts, the minimum depth is 4 feet or 1220 millimeters for condition 1, 5 feet or 1524 millimeters for condition 2, and 6 feet or 1829 millimeters for condition 3. These dimensions are specified in National Electrical Code Table 110.26A. Clear working space is essential for safety and accessibility around electrical equipment. The National Electrical Code provides guidelines to ensure adequate space for personnel to safely operate and maintain electrical systems. Regarding dedicated equipment space above and below the electrical equipment, the space must be dedicated to the electrical installation. No piping, ducts, or other equipment foreign to the electrical installation are permitted in this zone, extending from the floor to a height of 6 feet or 1.8 meters above the equipment, or to the structural ceiling, whichever is lower. Consider the location of the electrical equipment and ensure it is readily accessible. Obstructions that could impede access, such as stored materials or fixed objects, should be avoided. Also, lighting is a critical component of the working space. Adequate illumination must be provided to ensure safe working conditions. National Electrical Code Section 110.26d requires sufficient lighting to permit safe and effective work. Emergency systems should also be considered in the design to ensure lighting is available during power outages. Regarding the height of electrical equipment, the National Electrical Code specifies requirements for mounting heights of various electrical components to ensure accessibility and safety. For example, the center of the grip of the operating handle of switches and circuit breakers used as switches that are installed in switchboards or panel boards must not be more than 6 feet 7 inches or 2 meters above the floor or working platform, as per National Electrical Code Section 404.8a. This height requirement ensures that the devices are easily accessible for operation without the need for ladders or other equipment. For overcurrent devices in dwellings, the National Electrical Code Section 240.24 requires that overcurrent devices be readily accessible. They should not be located where they will be exposed to physical damage or in damp or wet locations. They also should not be located higher than 6 feet 7 inches or 2 meters above the floor or working platform, unless there are provisions for safe access. When installing a disconnect for equipment such as air conditioning units or motors, the disconnect must be readily accessible and located within sight of the equipment, as per National Electrical Code Section 440.14 and 430.102. This ensures that the equipment can be quickly de-energized in case of an emergency or during maintenance. However, the specific height at which the disconnect is mounted can vary depending on the installation and local requirements, but it must be accessible without climbing over obstacles. Regarding equipment installed in accessible attics or crawl spaces, National Electrical Code Section 210.8 AFRI requires a lighting outlet to be installed at or near the equipment requiring servicing, such as heating, air conditioning, and refrigeration equipment. The switching means for the lighting outlet must be located to the usual point of entry to these spaces. This helps to ensure that the service personnel can safely access and service the equipment. Regarding the installation of palboards in closed closets, this is generally not permitted due to the increased risk of fire and obstruction of access to the panel board. The National Electrical Code Section 240.24d specifically prohibits overcurrent devices from being located in closed closets or hazardous locations. To determine the correct mounting height for electrical equipment, it is essential to consult the National Electrical Code and local building codes. These codes provide specific requirements and guidelines for different types of equipment and installations. Also, consider the specific application and the needs of the personnel who will be operating and maintaining the equipment. Proper planning and adherence to these codes and standards will ensure a safe and compliant electrical installation.